Today, it's going to be quite a not rambling, but not particularly lucid live stream because I've been ill for the past four days, I think. So I haven't had a lot of preparation time. I've been thinking about this topic a lot. I'll take that scary picture off. Those are the wildfires in California. 500,000 people have been evacuated in Oregon, and Donald Trump is still saying that it's going to cool down and that climate change isn't real. Right, okay, anyway. And meanwhile, in the UK, HS2 ploughs ahead, and it's the death of the funeral bell is tolling for democracy in the UK on account of the UK Parliament voting against a treaty that the same UK Parliament voted for 6 months ago, voting to break the law. Okay, right. So I don't want to get too political, but it's a bit rubbish. So the best thing you can do is to plant a forest garden. And this is on a number of different levels, I think. There's two sides to this. Should I stick to my... I haven't really got a script. So what I wanted to talk about today with a forest garden, the reasons for growing it, and I've said this before, I've said this many times, the reasons why I'm so drawn to forest gardening is because of it's actually doing something practical about the climate emergency and the ecological emergency that we're facing, and it's a direct involvement for people. You are helping, no matter how small it might feel. You are making a difference. Forest gardening is a sign of hope. It's a way of engaging, and to that end, it is activism. It is doing something. It is not giving up. It is creating something. So I kind of heartily recommend it. I really, really do. And I don't know how many how many people we got listening. Oh yeah. So I've got a couple of people here. So for those people who don't know what a forest garden is, I just want to very, very get a quick definition of a forest garden. Essentially, it is think of it of an orchard, a wildlife garden, a wildlife orchard, and underplanted with perennial vegetables and with a permanent living ground cover. And that's a kind of simplest way of thinking about it. So it's a productive garden, but it's also a wildlife garden, and this is the whole idea behind it. The whole kind of reason for it is it's an edible ecosystem. Onto the slideshow. And yeah, Martin Crawford kind of sums it up. Martin Crawford sums it up very nicely with working with nature to grow edible crops. And I keep coming back to this because it really does sum it up so nicely. It really is this idea of it's a productive garden, but it's also a natural. You're working with natural processes as much as possible, and that's from Martin Crawford's book, Creating a Forest Garden. And in essence, it really is it's an edible ecosystem. This is what we're aiming for. This is the whole kind of purpose of the forest garden, is that we're kind of moving towards an edible ecosystem. So yes, and I think it's all really kind of worth thinking about. So my text editor has crashed today as well. It won't start up, so I'm using a different text editor for the slideshow. So it's all a bit. I have to kind of find my notes. So I think the kind of the key thing when you're creating the key thing about the diversity within an edible ecosystem is that you have to have diversity for it to be an ecosystem. And a large part of the issues that we're facing is that agriculture has become industrialized. Agriculture is about money. It is not about growing food. It's all about how much it costs. And if your agriculture is based upon that, then there will be a degradation of the environment. It is inevitable, because unless you're taking account of the environmental damage of artificial fertilizers and artificially, I mean, I'm a vegan anyway, but this kind of goes beyond that. This is about factory farming cows. If you don't take into account the environmental effects of factory farming cows and sheep and chickens, and feeding them soya from Brazil, like 90% of soya in the world is used for animal feed. So if you're not changing the actual agricultural system, then it will lead to a degradation of the environment, and this is central. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who will say that forest garden, you shouldn't make a forest garden political, but it can't be helped. It is connected. The whole reason for doing this, for me, is about the climate emergency and the ecological emergency. There's a United Nations report out yesterday about biodiversity with an action plan. Tony Juniper, head of Natural England, was on the radio on the Radio 4 programme today, and talking about what needs to be done. £1 billion investment in it, which is absolute chicken feed, so excuse the pun, compared to the £120 billion and rising that's being spent on a totally useless, worthless piece of infrastructure that is just lining the pockets of cronies of the government. It needs to be changed, but the fundamental system needs to be changed. Yep. So they are related. No way can a forest garden compete with industrial agriculture to produce food. So I don't know I don't know if there's any answer. I'm just going to concentrate on growing forest gardens, but I do think they are incredibly related. Land use and economic systems and forest gardens are intricately linked. There's no way around that. Ecological destruction and economic systems are intimately linked. So we need to I am going to continue growing plants, and I'm going to continue talking about forest gardening. But I do want to talk about the wider implications. And one of the key things that you can do. That's what I didn't do it. One of the key things that you can do is to use native plants, and this is something I was kind of quite surprised at. I did come into forest gardening with an open mind, really, because I didn't know what to expect. I've never done gardening in any kind of serious way before. It's only 7, 8 years ago, so not a long time to do it. And when I first started forest gardening, I was quite like, everything has to be edible. It has to be a totally productive system. Every plant has to have a harvest, and it's a really, quite a naive attitude. But I will have this ground cover because it has berries, and not that ground cover, rather than it being a much more holistic view, a holistic approach to the garden. So you actually have what are called system plants that are providing support for the garden as a whole, and they are as important. There is an equality in the garden because you are supporting the whole garden. It's not to get a harvest. The whole garden needs to function, and for the whole garden to function, you need to have system plants providing fertility and providing habitat and providing as a food source for predators that keep the whole garden in check. So I was quite surprised that I've been so taken with the natural side, the nature side of a forest garden. And there's a chap. I've got this one up here. I talk about this a lot. Just get a couple out. there's lots more. Oh, hell, I get them all. That's not that one. Oh, yes, that one. And... oh, there's lots. Oh, so I shouldn't do this. There's just too many books, really. Anyway, I've got a couple of books. So just to kind of give you an idea. Well, there's a brilliant book. I've got it next door, so I won't bother to go and get it. But it's called Wildflowers. Harrop's Wildflowers. Let me see if I can I'll just put it on here temporarily. Harrop's Wildflowers, and it's a wildflower book. Because there we go. It's here. Now the whole reason for using native plants in a forest garden is because you want to create an ecosystem, and an ecosystem, a forest garden, is very much site specific. It very much is about where that garden is, where you are in the world. So, for example, there's somebody in the group who's got a house their forest garden is an island, I think near Cork, and it's a different climate and different landscape and a different geology and different flora and different fauna. I mean, generally the same, but there is variation. So you're kind of planting, what you plant depends upon where you are, which goes back to the edible ecosystem side. So Harrop's Wildflowers, hold on a second, 2 books. First one is, I've talked about this before, so anybody who has watched me blather on before will know about this, but there's Benjamin Vogg's A New Garden Ethic, and this kind of really got me thinking about the principles behind planting with native plants. And the whole idea is native plants have co-evolved with native fauna, with the native insects. What you are doing is providing a food source for insects. You want insects to eat your plants. This might seem counterintuitive. This underpins a whole lot, because if you have insects that eat your plants, then you have predators that eat the insects. So you need to build up a healthy population of both. And this is kind of counterintuitive, but that's the principle behind it. You build up a good, solid food source, then you will have a good, solid predators, a number of predators as well. So the next kind of book, which is related to that, was I can only was a book about wildlife gardening. So I can only find one book, and this is you can get this off of Amazon or World of Books, I think. The Wild Garden by Violet Stevenson. It's not particularly. It's a UK. It's about 40 years old. It's the best book I can find. It's a good book. I won't knock it, but this is the only book I can find about ornamental gardening and native plants. Because a lot of the work that I do, I design forest gardens for a living, but a lot of people want ornamental gardens as well and want ornamental aspects of it. So this is an integral part for me, is to say, okay, well, I need to work. I'd rather work with native plants because this kind of fits in with the whole ethos of a forest garden. But there aren't any books which are about that. In America, it's different. In America, there's if you're in North America, then there are an awful lot more books out there. I mean, there's like half a dozen or so. I kind of haven't really researched them, and the whole thing kind of comes from that point. So this is why I've gone and bought Harrop's Wildflowers, and it is brilliant. I think it's absolutely fantastic. So I'm going to use that as a kind of a source to identify the wildflowers that I already have. So your red campion and your oh crikey, cranesbills, your geraniums, your cat's ears, is it? There's like whole loads of different types of dandelion type plants and all sorts of different flowers and all sorts of things, and actually use them and put them into the garden. So anyone doing ornamental stuff, I mean, there's Kate Bradbury's Wildlife Gardening and Jules Howard's Wildlife Pond book. So these are the kind of books that I recommend. And also Tapestry Lawn by Lionel Smith, which is great. There's a whole load of native plants you can use in a tapestry lawn. It's a non-grass lawn. So point is, I do think there's a lot of work that can be done to encourage people who aren't like forest garden enthusiasts to say, oh, okay, here's some native plants, here are some flowers. Draw the people in with flowers and at the same time as increasing the ornamental aspect of a forest garden, you're also increasing its diversity, and you're making it more attractive to people who are more accustomed to more traditional gardening. And as case in point, had a great conversation with Sarah Wilson, the host of the Roots and All podcast, and she's got a Patreon, so it's like you donate money to it. And she had a meeting of like people who donate money to the podcast show, and there's a chap. He's brilliant. I totally forgot his name. Cleve West, and he's like a well-known gardener, and he was great. Someone asked him a question about design, and he was talking about repetition in design, and saying, if you repeat something, then it makes it if you repeat something in a design, it makes it look like you've done it on purpose. So there is intent behind it. And then talking about different heights and using like colour schemes and the rest of it. Point is, you can do all of that with native wildflowers. You won't get the whole season kind of colour that you get with kind of the highly bred cultivars, but you can do it. And I think it's a real opportunity here to do it. And this is a brilliant thing, is that it increases diversity in the garden at the same time as well. So a forest garden is, not, I would say predominantly you could argue it's predominantly non-natives, because you're growing in for the crops. So you're growing sweet chestnuts and fruit and fruit trees, and fruit bushes, and there's a fair raspberries native, gooseberries native, apples colour been around for so long it pretty much is native. Same with sweet chestnut, pretty much native. So but it's got quite a few non-natives. But a kind of good rule of thumb, there's a chap, an author, and crikey, he's an entomologist, I think. Does that mean words, or is that etymologist? Douglas Tallamy, who's written some very good books, which I haven't actually read. I've just kind of listened to him on various podcasts, and he's brilliant. Really, really love it. And he's got a very handy rule of thumb, which is 2/3 for the birds. And this means 2/3 native by biomass, I think he means. Or maybe it's the number of species, but 2/3 for the birds. So you get enough insects, and then that's absolutely fine in a garden. So you can have 1/3 non-natives and 2/3 natives. And I kind of think that's just to kind of like bear that in mind. I should be able to give you, kind of practical examples. Am I going to do that now? Yeah. So kind of practical examples. Is I better check. Okay, it's going to take a little pause. I'm going to have a sip of tea there. So I just want to give practical examples. I'm going to read the comments. So excuse me. Okay, so yeah. Oh, great. Okay, so Pam's mentioned in the chat about where she is, surrounded by beef and dairy farms and wind farms. So I wanted to talk about. I'll come back to this positioning of the garden, but I want to talk about the diversity and kind of practical examples of it. And I wanted to be out in the garden. I'm not feeling up to it, ready to be out in the garden. But there's the reasons. I wanted to show you practical examples of diversity and how it actually kind of works. But there's I'll talk about it instead. The reasons for having diversity is that firstly you get a range of harvest. You have a diverse range. I mean, this is a big thing in the in terms of diet. There's a permaculture. There's a chap, really good bloke, Rakesh, Rootsman, and he was talking about the other day. He was talking about the amount of there's only like 4 foods, I think: rice, potatoes, wheat, maize. I think are the 4 main staple kind of crops for humans, and like an orangutan has like 250 on a daily basis or something like that. But it's the lack of diversity in diets because, again, market pressures, industrialized agriculture, which has led to industrialized agriculture. All the pressure is on to reduce and to simplify and to create a monocrop. Whereas in a forest garden, the absolutely beautiful thing is that you have a range of harvests, and I think the range of harvests is really interesting because you can have a lot of you can have a bad year for one crop and a good year for other crops. So for this year, we've had a very bad year for plums. I mean, there's a Shropshire prune's done really well, and the apples have done okay. Have done not bad at all. They have done well apart from the wind that we had. Blackcurrants were good. Raspberries were so earlier on, but there's a flush in the autumn ones have been much better. So you have a balance of harvests, and you're not just kind of relying upon one crop for your food. And this kind of brings the diversity, brings resilience, so that one thing does well, another thing doesn't do so well, and it all kind of but it balances out that you're getting enough from your garden. I think there's an awful lot to talk about in terms of forest gardens as food systems, and this is where I am, to be honest, at the very early stages of a forest garden, where we're not, we're nowhere near self-sufficient with them. But I think it's well worth looking at this. This is something that I want to develop as a project to make forest gardens kind of how much food can you get from a forest garden, and how much can you incorporate that into your diet and to replace food brought in from elsewhere. But longer term as well, I think this will become more and more important. And then the diversity brings resilience into the whole ecosystem. So you have a diverse range of plants. They actually increase the temperature in the winter. They decrease the temperature in the summer, just from the shelter that you have, and it improves the drainage off the land as well. So you're not getting runoff, and it locks the moisture in more as well as so it improves everything for the whole ecosystem. And as I said before, you have a range of system plants. You have a range of plants like Italian alders for nitrogen from leaf fall and root dieback that feeds nitrogen back into the soil. That improves the health of the ecosystem as a whole. So there's a really, diversity really is kind of fundamental part of this. Now, what I wanted to talk about now was psychogeography. I don't actually know what psychogeography is, but I think it's such a cool word. I saw it in someone's job title the other day. I thought I had to have it as a slide because it's brilliant. I think it's I got a vague idea what it means, but it's how people fit into their landscape. And this is kind of coming back to Pam's point about her land, which she says is surrounded by beef and dairy farms and wind farms, and kind of the same here. We've got a lot of dairy around this area. So, a couple of things I want to say about this in terms of diversity. What is so interesting about forest garden is that the whole idea is you're not bringing in there aren't any external inputs. Yep, there's no external inputs. I'll change that because that's not quite right. There are no external inputs. All the fertility of the forest garden is from the garden itself. You're not bringing in compost, you're not bringing in seaweed, you're not bringing in, you might bring in a little bit of mulch, but even then, really, once the garden's established, you won't need to. There's no external inputs, and you kind of think this kind of shuts the garden off in some respects from external. That's the kind of impression that it gives. But actually, what you're doing is you're relying upon the garden situation within the landscape. And this goes back to the point I made earlier on, that every single garden sits within a landscape. And if you are looking at native plants for a garden particularly, it's very site specific. Yep, every garden is different. So your garden, what you plant, what you grow, how you grow it's brilliant because it's all very different. Same principles, but all very different. And I think the other side of this is that a forest garden is about people. So you're gardening with people in mind. A forest garden is, like every garden, is a construct. It's not how there is human intervention, but the idea is that it's minimal human intervention. that you're gardening with natural processes, and it's not a hippie thing. It's a very practical, scientific thing that you're engaged in, but it's far more about the people. It's not a process that is imposed upon the land. It is a process that the people are involved with, and then what ends up happening is that you have a relationship with the land. That sounds like, oh, that's a bit hippie talk, but absolutely not. Absolutely not. You're involved. You have a direct involvement with growing your food. So I think it's like really, really important. Oh, and so yeah, and then that whole point of how it sits, like the psychogeography of an area, I think is kind of really, really interesting. So here in West Wales, we've got neighbours. They're brilliant neighbours up the top, and they're dairy farmers. And there's a industrial dairy farm across the valley, which you can see from the house. Yesterday, I saw combine harvesters on. I would say they're not meadows. There's no animals. There's no cows grazing. They just harvest the grass to make silage, and that is to feed cows in the factories, in the big cow sheds that they never come out. They're in there all the time, and that's what the silage is used for. And so if you go up to the cow factory, it's a massive, great big barn filled with cows. On the other side of the road, there's this huge. I mean, it's crikey, it's 10 meters tall. This huge pile of silage, and people say, oh, you can't. Don't mention that you're a vegan in West Wales, because people get rather upset because it's a challenge to their livelihood, and I can totally understand that, but I just think, but this cow factory and this massive pile of silage and this industrial hellhole that you've created, is that really part of your heritage? Do you know? Are you proud of this? Is this who you are? I'm kind of like, this isn't farming. This isn't farming. This is factory work. So you have to be the land where you're working, where you're at. That's where we are. We're in the midst of this. So it's kind of, it's interesting. It's kind of interesting what you say about it. So anyway, on with the people. Behind, as I said before, behind every garden there is a person. It's a relationship. You have a relationship with the land, but every garden is a social construct. Every garden has a history. There's a fascinating looking book about the economics of gardening and the relationship with culture. I can tell you. Maybe I shouldn't, but I can tell you what it's called. Oh dear, I've lost it. Wildflowers, Economics of the English Garden. And I think it's just absolutely, this is kind of really, really interesting, that because there's a person involved with a forest garden and every garden, then there is a culture attached to that as well. So it's kind of understanding that and understanding why people garden the way that they do. It's not, a garden isn't just plants. I'll just put that in here so you can just see it very quickly. Wildflowers, Economics of the English Garden. So I found a YouTube video about that. So the point is, because there's a person behind every garden is different. Every forest garden is different because it's depending upon your conditions, where you are, where you're situated, the landscape, the landscape in terms of cultural, historical, geographical landscape. The whole lot all has an effect on what you grow and how you grow it, and where you get your plants from. Everything is kind of quite interesting. And every garden is different because of the people. The people behind it are all different as well. You've got different jobs, you've got different social situations, you've got different members of the family. Everything is kind of like, what you do really, really is very, very different. And so there's multiple solutions. And I think this is totally to be encouraged. I meant to say that as well. I think this idea, the diversity of situations and the diversity of people involved, has to be encouraged. I am only one person. I have got like a particularly narky viewpoint on the world. Troublemaking and all the rest of it, but there are other people who have a different viewpoint and have a different angle, and I think encourage all the angles, be open to it, listen to it, take it on board, and I'm actually quite keen. I was thinking about it today to get other people involved involved in the live stream, to get other people to talk to other people and to see what they've got to say about forest gardening and what their take on it is and what they're up to, because it just adds more to it rather than just me spouting off some pseudo intellectual rubbish. So there are multiple solutions to gardening, and it offers up. You have a diversity of people taking part. Then you have a diversity of ideas and different ways of doing stuff, which I think is always good. And then the outside bit that I was going to do was to this is the this is the encouraging wildlife. This is the bit I was going to do outside, but there's a lovely thread on the National Forest Gardening Scheme, National Forest Gardening Scheme, NFGS, National Forest Gardening Scheme. They've got a chat, and there's a nice thread on there about the increased biodiversity in a forest garden, and the chap Paul Pivacek, I think his name is, really nice guy. He's looking for kind of scientific studies, or practical information backing this up, the idea of biodiversity. And someone mentioned microhabitats. I think it's so cool. I think it's really good to encourage wildlife. The opportunity you have with a garden and with a forest garden is that you can create multiple microhabitats. Microhabitats sound brilliant because it's like, when anyone talks about a microclimate, it always means it rains more. Every single time, we've got a microclimate here, it's pissing down with rain. So microhabitats, I just got visions of little clouds hovering around the garden, just raining on things. But a microhabitat will mean that you have some water, you have an area. So we've got, crikey, 2, 3, 4 ponds now. Well, on the way, we've got 4 ponds. And they're artificial, but it just increases the biodiversity incredibly. And I wanted to show you my stick pile. This is one of my favourite wildlife features to encourage wildlife. You get a pile of sticks, and that's it. You just get a pile of sticks, and then you just leave them, and you get a whole range of different animals in there. And I found lovely toads, and I found a lizard the other day. First time I've seen a lizard here. That was about a month ago. So you create these little microhabitats, and the garden is fantastic for that, because you can put in all these different plants and all these different habitats and hedges. And people kind of, I was watching Garden as well, and he's saying, the ponds want the best way of bringing in wildlife, but hedges is another fantastic way as well, and meadows, like an area of long grass. But hedges are brilliant because it's nesting habitat and food source as well. So what we've got here, I was originally going to plant an autumn olive hedge at the back of the first forest garden, and I didn't do that. I planted Gelder rose, sea buckthorn, Juneberry, and autumn olive as well. The autumn olive that I bought, they were sick or something. They all died. So it's a good job I did have a diverse range of hedging species, because otherwise I'd have ended up with nothing after the first year. So it's good to plant a mixture. I always think it's kind of, repeat the patterns to make it repeat them, make it look, it's been designed if you want, but put a mixture in if you can. Another thing to think about as well when you're encouraging wildlife is diverse mediums. And I think there is a real tendency for everybody to say, particularly with a forest garden, it's a forest garden, I want rich, lush soil, I'll put loads of mulch down, I'll put loads of compost or organic material on, and build up the soil health. And yes, for fruit trees, for example, which need lots of are nutrient heavy, have high nutrient demands, but don't do it everywhere. Do leave different parts. You will have enough. You'll have enough space. There's a chap called John Little who I've talked about before, and I really rate him actually. I think he's great. I've looked at a couple of videos that he's done about some of the work, and he is talking about using what's there essentially, or using cheap materials. So don't have rich loam everywhere. Have it where you need it, but do work with what you've got. And this comes back to creating more diverse habitats and having a more diverse range of plants if you're working with what's already there. So if you've got a big patch of gravel and go, oh, this is a big patch of gravel, I can't put an apple tree there, put an apple tree somewhere else, and then put in some, I can't think of any plants at all off the top of my head. Evening primrose isn't a native, but put in plants that like those particular conditions. Sea kale, for example, Cramba maritima, but put in plants that will like those conditions. Saltbush, I don't know if that's actually a native, Atriplex. But the idea is work with what you've got to kind of create these different habitats, these micro-habitats. So, yeah, there we go. And then finally, is that finally? Yes, finally. Encouraging diversity. So explore, keep your mind open, look at different sources of information. And I've just been amazed. It's been brilliant, actually. I've just got such a diverse range of books and kind of interests. And had such a nice chat last week on the Zoom when there were two people talking about mushrooms, and that's really kind of stimulated my interest to find out more about growing mushrooms. So explore different avenues. Other thing is plant natives. I really kind of can't say this enough. Really, plant natives where you can, yeah, not to the exclusion of crop bearing plants, but plant natives, and take positive action. I was going to have a rant, but this wasn't really a rant. I was going to have a rant about Facebook, but I can't be asked really. There's some people who've just been a bit out of line on Facebook. I've made my course available for anyone who's I said black Asian minority ethnic group. Then there's 10 free courses a month, and also if you're a student or if you're unwaged. So basically, people who've been disadvantaged, there's 10 free courses on for my online workshop. And then someone's got really arsey and has been quite abusive to other people on the group. And funnily enough, I can actually see the point. It's you've got to be careful of what you call it and how you phrase it. I kind of like to think of it as positive action rather than positive discrimination. There's a difference in terminology, and also not to exclude people. So I'll probably change the wording. I will change the wording of it to say that if you feel that you are from a disadvantaged ethnic background or something like that, then that will get around this whole, oh, you'll discriminate against me because I'm white and male and privileged. So anyway, yeah, that's enough of that rant. But positive action, do the thing that you can do, help people out. Positive action speaks so much more than mouthing off in a Facebook group, which I'll stop doing, I think. Anyway, there we go. Hope that was useful. So yeah, I'll just have a quick look at the chat just to add. Oh Christ, I've talked for ages and ages. Okay, so I'll just have a quick look at the chat. Sorry, yeah. Oh crikey, there's loads. Oh, there's absolutely tons. Oh, that's brilliant. Sorry. Yeah, I'm not gonna have a chance to read all of that. So yeah. So what I will do, yeah. So thanks for the comments. I'll read up on it. I'm going to post in before I go. I hope that's useful and interesting. I don't know if people want to see me kind of get annoyed and everything, but I do think it's all very much related. And I do think what is the most positive thing that has come out of this has been the feedback that I've had. There's a black woman on the Facebook group who said, "Thank you for doing this. I feel like I've been heard. I've had years of abuse and feeling like an exclusion, and this means a lot. So that, for me, that is the positive side of it. That's something that I've got to take away. And actually, the feedback that I've had off the people off of from the live stream and from the WhatsApp group, it's been really, really good. It's been actually something that has made me reevaluate the importance of, I hate the word community because I'm such an individualist, but the importance of community and the importance of people working together and helping each other out. So I think, yeah, the takeaway from this for me is like, do positive action, do what you can, how you can, where you can, and it's the positive aspect of it. It's whether you're sharing seeds or cuttings or helping people out or talking about things or whatever it is, it's kind of expanding that and then, yeah, doing good work in the world. And that includes what's the chat called it? Making good trouble as well. So, hope that's useful. I'll just paste in the... I didn't record any of that, did I? Never mind. I will just paste in the URL for the Zoom chat. Okay, and... that, and the password is habitat, and there we go. So this is probably recorded on Twitch anyway. So for those people who are new here and who are watching me for the first time, I'm not normally this coldy and I'm not normally this ranty, and I normally talk much more about plants and stuff. So thank you all very much. Come along to the Zoom chat if you'd like to. And I shall see you over there. I'll keep the chat open and everything. Keep an eye on that. But I shall see you over in Zoom in a sec. Okay, cheers then. Bye.